All right. Good morning, everybody. I think we should be live now. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. This is the Maine Climate Council's June quarterly meeting and the second meeting of this year. Really appreciate everybody joining us this morning on a somewhat dreary June morning. I know everybody's been really busy wrapping up the legislative session. Many of you are juggling end of school year and summer plans, so thanks for taking the time with us this morning. I think if we want to move on to the agenda slide, this morning we're primarily going to spend our time talking about some updates, both at the state and federal level. We're going to be hearing from Brian Ambrett and Samantha Horn at the Maine Office of Community Affairs about recent developments in resilience planning and funding. We're going to hear from Michael Stoddard about the new Efficiency Maine Trust triennial plan that will fund much of the state's electrification efforts over the next few years. We're also going to get an update from the Science and Technical Subcommittee on their efforts to identify key research funding gaps that are due to federal actions and how that might affect the subcommittee's work over the coming years. We also have some great updates from the Department of Education about our Green Schools program and some recent advances in Maine's building codes. So today, we are working on implementation of Maine Won't Wait 2.0. We've got some good updates to give you on some of the work that's ongoing. We're still in the midst of trying to wrap up legislative session. So today is really about just getting you up to speed on the things that are happening so that we can start thinking about what we're going to do next over the rest of the year. But before we get into that, I want to start with some really exciting news. As many of you know, Anna Pingree has left GOPEF, and some of you may have seen some announcements this morning about that. And while we are going to miss having her as my co-chair greatly with the Maine Climate Council, I am so excited to have joining me today Sarah Curran as our new Maine Climate Council co-chair and director of GOPEF. Sarah has been deeply involved in the council since its beginning. I'm sure all of you have seen her and are familiar with her, and she has been in the background, intrinsically involved in everything that we've been doing since the very beginning. She knows the ins and outs of the climate plan probably better than anybody else does, and I am really appreciative of her willingness to step up into the director of GOPEF position and as the Climate Council co-chair, and would love to give Sarah a minute to introduce herself and say hi to everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie. It is an absolute honor to serve as co-chair alongside with you, and I am very excited to continue the important work that this council has accomplished so far. As many of you know, I've been with GOPEF since 2019. I've helped to support the state's climate action plan, as well as our office's work with communities, and we've made a lot of progress. And at the same time, the challenge of climate change remains both urgent and significant. So I look forward to working with all of you to continue Maine's leadership on climate action. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Also wanted to recognize a few of our new and returning legislative members who I think might be joining us this morning. Senator Stacey Brenner will be returning to the Climate Council. Representative Amanda Collmore is joining us as a council member, but she's previously served on the Community Resilience Working Group. We also have joining us Senator Bruce Bickford and Representative Chris Kessler, who is also a returning member. I also wanted to let everyone know before we get going that the council is currently seeking some new youth representatives for several of our working groups. So I think, as you know, our working groups include 1 to 2 youth representatives to help us with implementation of Maine Won't Wait, to give us that next generation perspective, because they're going to be inheriting the results or the work that we leave behind. Currently, our transportation working group, buildings, infrastructure, and housing working groups are all each seeking two new youth representatives, and our energy working group is looking for 1 new youth representative. So if you know anybody who might be interested, for those who are out there listening who might be interested, please check out our website, www.maine.gov/climate plan. So if you just go to Maine's Climate Plan website, you'll find a link to look into the details of how to sign up to ask to join us and be a youth representative. And so I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and we can start moving into our updates.
Great. Thank you, Melanie. I want to talk a little bit about some of the federal activity that sort of provides the context and the landscape for our work. As many of you know, the past few months have been a whirlwind of federal activity, and it'll be a while before we can fully understand the impacts on our work. Since January, many of the programs funded by BIL and IRA have experienced disruption, including programs that invest in clean energy, active transportation, and climate resilience. And in addition, the budget reconciliation package passed recently by the House includes rollbacks of many of the IRA's clean energy tax credits, including tax credits for purchasing EVs, installing energy efficiency upgrades in homes, cuts to commercial clean energy credits, and changes to the IRA's transferability provisions, which will make credit transfers more difficult. So the House bill now goes to the Senate, which has indicated that portions will likely change before it is approved. But overall, this uncertainty and the proposed changes could have significant funding implications for climate action, including in Maine. So we are tracking it closely. At the same time, I'd say our work continues to be to find ways to protect Maine's progress, to sustain the benefits and cost savings that come from so much of this work. And today, you're going to hear important updates about how Maine is moving forward with climate action. We'll hear about some very significant progress in the resilience area since our last Climate Council meeting, and from Michael Stoddard about how the Efficiency Maine's triennial plan is a powerful tool to achieve cost savings and emission reductions in our buildings and transportation sectors. In these and other initiatives, Maine is leading on climate action, and we will continue to stay focused on implementing the recommendations of this council in Maine Won't Wait, even in the face of federal uncertainty. I now want to turn it over to Brian Ambrette, who's going to update us on some key resilience activities. Many of you know that Brian has moved over from GOPIF to become the new director of the State Resilience Office at the Maine Office of Community Affairs. We are so excited to have him continue the incredible work that he has been leading at GOPIF over the last 6 years. And thank you, Brian.
Super. Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all this morning. Over here now in the Office of Community Affairs, I'm really pleased to be here with Samantha Horn, who's on the line and able to answer any questions this morning if things come up that folks have for her as well. But I'm going to cover the update this morning from MOCA and the State Resilience Office. And if you could hop to the next slide, Ashley. We're going to take a bit of a whirlwind tour through resilience activities over the next 10 to 12 minutes or so. So high-level updates, many of these are programs or initiatives that you all have heard about in previous meetings. So I'm not going to dive too deeply into details, but I do want to give a status update on many of these. So we'll start with the status of the Maine Office of Community Affairs and the State Resilience Office. Then we'll move into LD1, which went into effect in April. We'll cover some big developments over the past couple of weeks and months from the Community Resilience Partnership. The Infrastructure Rebuilding and Resilience Commission released its final report and infrastructure plan last month. And then lastly, we have the NOAA grant Resilient Maine project going on. And so we have some updates for you from that work across state agencies and our partners outside of government. So the State Resilience Office is located in the Maine Office of Community Affairs. That office, as you all know, started about a year ago. Samantha Horn is the director leading the effort to bring programs together from across state agencies and to really harmonize the work that they're doing in order to make it more accessible and more coordinated for communities who are trying to access those opportunities. This work is starting to become more visible and tangible. MOCA has office space now, and staff from the various programs have been meeting monthly since about December to get to know one another better, to start thinking about what the opportunities are for coming together in one space, and to really start planning that move. There are 7 existing programs that are slated to move into MOCA from their current home agencies this fall, once the new state budget takes effect and actually moves those programs over. The State Resilience Office is in a slightly different situation. It was created by LD1, which went into effect immediately upon the governor's signature on April 22nd. As Sarah said, I started as the director of the office on May 12th. So I've been here just about a month now, and working through the process of standing up a new office, and importantly, hiring new staff, bringing new staff on board. So our first employee, Noah Bazanson, started on June 2nd, last week. He is a NOAA fellow for inland flood risk, one of 2 fellows that NOAA is providing to the state of Maine as part of our grant award. Our second fellow will join later this month. We are currently interviewing candidates for 3 additional positions to support the Community Resilience Partnership, support our communications, and support state agency resilience planning. So we're hoping that those folks will be on board sometime this summer. And then the last bit of hiring that we expect is for the 2 positions provided to the Resilience Office by LD1 for the Flood Ready Maine initiative. And I'll talk more about those on the next slide. Ashley, go ahead. So as I said, LD1 took effect on April 22nd. It was an emergency bill, and so it goes into effect immediately. And you'll recall that this bill had bipartisan co-sponsorship from the leadership of both parties. And implementation is getting underway across the Bureau of Insurance, MEMA, and here at MOCA. And so I have an update from the Bureau of Insurance, and then I'm going to call on Ann Fuchs in just a moment to give the update from MEMA. So at the Bureau of Insurance, they are developing basically the business plan for the home resiliency program. As it says on the screen here, this is a grant program for homeowners to strengthen their homes against high winds and flooding, so that they can, over time, lower their insurance premiums and make their homes better protected against extreme weather. So the Bureau is evaluating a software platform to manage their grant program. They're determining a staffing plan, whether they're going to run this program in-house or outsource it to a third party. They're developing the rules to guide the program. They're consulting with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety and other states that have adopted a similar program to learn about their best practices for implementation and rollout. They're planning a rollout that will focus initially on roof resiliency. So that's the wind hazard, and target initially 2 or 3 regions of the state to pilot this. And then looking at the first quarter of 2026, so next year, for their first grant awards for the program. The Bureau will also be working with insurers to make sure that homeowners are getting the advantage of that premium discount for homes that are becoming more protected and more resilient. And they are working on the eligibility rules, so that eligibility is restricted to Maine residents, no camps, no second homes or condos. They're making sure that certain insurance requirements will apply to the properties that receive these grants, and that the award amounts will be tiered with larger benefits for lower income homeowners. So that's the update from the Bureau of Insurance on the Home Resiliency Program. I will pass it over to Ann to talk about things going on at MEMA under LD1.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and good morning, everybody. We certainly have been busy just alongside Brian in the State Resilience Office, planning out a lot of our future for many different factors. But when it comes to LD1, we're very fortunate to receive funding to the Disaster Recovery Fund, 2 limited period positions, which I'll start my first update with. One being for IPAWS, an Integrated Public Alert and Warning System limited period position, and the other being for the Safeguarding Tomorrow Revolving Loan Fund administrative position. So both of those FJAs were moved forward last month. Neither one is expected to be stuck in the human resources suspended HR services. They're both considered emergency positions, so we got them in within plenty of time. We saw one come through yesterday. We'll move a financial order in the very near future for probably both positions, hoping to have both of those secured and ready to advertise, if not early July, probably the mid-July timeframe. So moving in the right direction there with the additional assistance for MEMA. When it comes to the Safeguarding Tomorrow revolving loan fund, we've been actively reaching out, communicating with a number of other states that have taken this on and have taken it on for years to learn their best implementation practices, lessons learned, how they structure their state revolving loan fund. Everybody's a little bit different, but we certainly have a better grasp as to what we're up against and what our next steps are. Our team and the Service Center will be meeting with Maine Municipal Bond Bank this afternoon to discuss a potential partnership. So Maine Municipal Bond Bank has actively partnered with other state agencies on 2 other revolving loan funds. So we'll kick off that conversation today. We started our solicitation for project proposals yesterday. So that went out via press release. We've updated our website. Essentially, part of our application package to actually pursue the Safeguarding Tomorrow revolving loan fund, which is a grant between the state and FEMA, to actually kick off and jumpstart a state revolving loan fund. Part of the application package is a prioritization of projects that were submitted in our solicitation process. So we're required to advertise for at least 6 weeks. So we have our solicitation open until July 25th, 2025. We're interested in everyone on the call helping us disseminate this information as widely as possible. We're already getting some good questions on it. And so we'll probably update with a FAQ for our website in the very near future. But essentially, we're looking to build out justification within our application for up to $6.75 million in federal funding. So with LD1, we had $750,000 made available for the state's cost share, which means that puts our ability to ask for up to $6.75 million in our application. So we're looking for project proposals that actually fulfill or exemplify the need for so much federal funding to jumpstart the fund. So we'd appreciate your assistance in helping to get the word out. The revised fiscal year 25 Safeguarding Tomorrow revolving loan fund notice of funding opportunity was taken down with the new administration a couple months ago. We are expecting the revised version this month. So as soon as we have that, we'll also make that available on our website. We're just expecting changes to things along the side of disadvantaged communities and equity, unfortunately. Let's see, last on my list to update. The current application deadline is late September 2025, and we'll just continue to update our website and keep everyone appraised on this call as to any changes in regards to application status or changes to the actual program at large. But in short, everything's coming together very nicely. You know, our states have been great partners to kind of guide us through this process, and we're on our way towards our application towards this program. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ann. That's great. And really exciting that this new funding source is going to be hopefully becoming available to communities in Maine to diversify the types of awards that we can make to communities and hopefully get more complex and expensive projects done at the community level. So super exciting. Thanks to all the team at MEMA that's implementing the pieces of LD1 here. Ann and I are in close touch on things like this. So it's a really great partnership and opportunity for the state. I covered most of the updates on the previous slide for the State Resilience Office and the Flood Ready Maine initiative. As I said, we're doing the hiring for the positions right now that were provided by the NOAA grants. And then once we get through with that, we will start the process for hiring the positions for the LD1 provides for the Flood Ready Maine initiative and getting those programs underway. Ashley, next slide. So the Community Resilience Partnership has had a very active spring and early summer. The program awarded its largest grant round to date on May 1st, and I have to give major props out to the team, Ashley and Casey, who reviewed over 100 applications and made 96 awards for this round of grants. It was a Herculean effort to get that money moving and out the door. And then right on the heels of that, opening a new grant round, which I'll cover in just a second. So to date, 166 communities have received grant awards in this round, totaling $8 million. That's across both our Community Action Grant program and the Service Provider Grant. This brings the total dollars awarded since the inception of the program to just over $19 million, which is absolutely phenomenal. Last year, Governor Mills set a goal to have 80% of Maine towns participating in the Community Resilience Partnership by 2030. And today we stand at 53%. So we're making really great progress. And we've got our work cut out for us to meet that goal, but we think we can do it. Furthermore, we now have technical assistance contracts with all 10 of Maine's regional councils, council of governments, regional planning organizations. And this means that every community in the state can get in touch with their regional coordinator to ask a question about getting started in the program, or to get help developing a project concept, or to get help finding a funding source for their project. So these regional coordinators are a really important part of the program. They're really important capacity for the state to help communicate opportunities and for communities to help them develop projects. The partnership is managing nearly 200 active awards and contracts right now. So this is really a testament to the demand across the state for this kind of funding, the kinds of activities and technical assistance that we're providing. And so it's just been super exciting to see the growth of this program. And the team isn't stopping. If you go to the next slide, Ashley, just last week, Ashley and team opened up the next round of grants for communities. All communities that are enrolled in the program are eligible to apply. And enrollment materials can be submitted simultaneously, as always, with a grant application. So communities that want to take advantage of the funding opportunity but aren't yet enrolled can do that. And they should probably talk with their regional coordinator to get more information on that. We have up to $4.7 million available for community action grants this round, again, utilizing a mix of state and federal funding as we have in past rounds. The max grant award is $75,000 for individual communities, and again, $175,000 for joint community projects. New for this round, the team has expanded the list of eligible community actions to include actions that align with the Climate Council's 2024 Maine Won't Wait update. So this includes new activities around materials management, land use strategies to increase resilience, additional community resilience actions, and more. So there are now 96 actions, up from 72, that are eligible for no match grant funding. In addition to those community action grants, communities are also eligible to work with a service provider organization, such as a regional council or an environmental consultant, to apply for service provider grants to complete a community vulnerability assessment that looks across vulnerable infrastructure, populations that might be at risk, and other community priorities. This will be the second round that this vulnerability assessment option is offered. And we saw really good uptake from this in the first round. So we're excited for more communities to learn about where they have risk and what their options for addressing those are. Applications for the Community Action Grant are due on August 29th. Applications for those service provider grants are due a few weeks earlier than that. And there's more information on this program on the GoPIF website. Next slide. So last two slides here. The first, as you all know, the Infrastructure Rebuilding and Resilience Commission sort of ran in parallel with the Climate Council's planning process over much of the last year. The commission was created by executive order of Governor Mills in response to the storms of 2023 and 2024. The commission, again, you all know this, but was charged with reviewing and evaluating Maine's response to those storms, identifying crucial area for near-term investment and policy needs, and developing the state's first long-term infrastructure plan to ensure that we're ready for storms ahead. The commission delivered its final report and plan for infrastructure resilience to Governor Mills on May 7th. This event took place at the Maine Health Lincoln Hospital in Damariscotta, which was a really illustrative site because the causeway that provides the principal access to that site is overtopped several times a year by storm surge and high tides. And so the hospital and the town have partnered to elevate that causeway. And we were, it was still under construction, but usable when we were there. So it was really great, great project. The town also recently completed a major stormwater storage project in the downtown to protect businesses from flooding that they see fairly frequently there. The plan itself is organized into 3 pillars with 11 strategies and over 50 actions. The report had a number of key messages, a couple of which include that this situation for infrastructure is urgent. Given the age of our infrastructure in Maine and the increasing severity of storms, as Sarah said at the top, this is significant and important for the state to address urgently now and thinking about it for the long term. Second message is that Maine must become more active, capable, and self-resourced in making resiliency improvements. So thinking about the types of things that we're capable of doing, the amount of investment that we're able to bring to this issue, the commission felt that it was really important that the state really start thinking about its own resources and how to bolster those as these storms become more damaging and in relation to potential federal changes, policy changes at the federal level. The plan assigns responsibilities to state agencies and partners for implementing each of the 50 actions. The State Resilience Office will track implementation and report regularly on the progress that its partners are making. And as I'm done here giving this presentation, I will drop a link in the chat to the plan document so that you all have that and can take a look at it. Next slide. So lastly, I'll wrap up with an update on the NOAA grant. The update this morning is that the grant is continuing to progress. We are 8 months into the award, and the state continues to have access to the funding. Our partners are moving ahead. Many of them have completed hiring for the work that's being done and are well into implementation. Our cooperative agreement team at NOAA continues to be a very strong partner and provides technical assistance to many of the tasks and our partners in this scope of work. On the ground, as I said, our partners are hiring staff, fellows, core members, and they are making grants to communities, engaging stakeholders in the work, and beginning to develop some of those technical assistance resources and initiatives that were called for in the scope of work. The execution of this scope of work is distributed across more than a dozen agencies and partners, including the University of Maine and some of our nonprofit friends. And GoPIF is coordinating a monthly steering committee and quarterly all partners meetings, as well as a semi-annual report to NOAA. So the work is underway, and invite you to ask questions to learn more about specific tasks and activities that are happening under the grant. So that's my last slide. It was a whirlwind tour through the world of climate resilience right now in the state of Maine. It is really, really impressive to think how far we've come since those storms of 23 and 24 and that Emergency Climate Council meeting that we held that January. So I want to thank all of you council members who've been really instrumental to making a lot of this happen, and particularly to those of you who serve double duty as council members and members of the Infrastructure Commission. Thank you for your work and for your ongoing work to implement all of the great ideas that we've been through. So I'll hand it back to Molly.
I think it's over to Michael now.
Great.
Thanks, Molly. Let's see if I can make this happen. Are you ready for me?
I think Sarah was going to do a quick intro.
Go for it.
That's all right. Thanks, Michael. I just wanted to say thank you to Brian. That is a lot of activity and really appreciate the work that's underway and the opportunity to hear about all the different initiatives. I think, as we've all seen, investing in the resilience of our people and businesses and communities is absolutely critical. And so it's exciting to see all this great work underway. I think as a bridge to Michael, we just also wanted to highlight that even as we continue to invest in the resilience, we know that we need to reduce our emissions in order to lessen the impacts that we're all experiencing from climate. So very excited to hear from Michael Stoddard this morning about Efficiency Maine new triennial plan. The plan is one of the ways that we can keep funding this work and ensuring that Mainers are getting the benefits of energy savings that come with greater energy efficiency. Efficiency Maine's Triennial Plan 6, approved by the Maine PUC on April 25th, outlines many benefits for Mainers, including lower energy bills, suppression of electricity rates, and advancing carbon reduction targets. So very excited to have Michael here this morning to talk about the new triennial plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody. Let me know if you can see this.
Looks great.
Okay, great. So, as Sarah mentioned, this was passed just over a month ago by the Public Utilities Commission. It is a plan that we are required statutorily to produce every 3 years, and it outlines the activities and the budgets and the forecasted metrics for the next 3 years of activity. So this will take effect on July 1 in a few weeks and constitute our blueprint for what we're supposed to be doing at Efficiency Maine for the next 3 years. There are a handful of core program areas that we run and will continue to run over the course of the triennial plan. The first category is commercial and industrial, and we have 2 programs within that. One we call custom, which is for big, complex projects that need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. These are big steam turbines, distributed generation, big battery projects, and they are we ascertain their cost effectiveness on a case-by-case basis. The prescriptive, as the name suggests, is just the opposite of that. It's a laundry list of pre-qualified project types, and if the customer, which could be any kind of non-residential building, it could be including multifamily buildings, but anything that's not a 1 or 2 unit home is eligible for this category. And this is lots of lighting and now lots of HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning projects, as well as refrigeration projects. So you do the project, you get a fixed rebate. The one probably most folks are familiar with is our program serving homes and homeowners and renters. The home energy savings program is more sort of market rate projects and rebates, and this is weatherization and home insulation projects, and then also heat pump projects primarily. There are a couple of other things thrown in there, but those are the big ones. And then as a companion category is for income eligible homes. So that's where we are providing those same incentives for those same kinds of projects, but at a higher tier of incentives. So the low income rebates are just about 3 times the size of the everybody else rebates. And so that's where we've been doing heat pumps and weatherization primarily. Retail and distributor is the programs that we run through, as the name suggests, the hardware stores of Maine and the big box stores of Maine, and then the stores where all the plumbers and electricians buy their stuff. So those are called distributors. So FW Web and Johnson Controls and places like that, Johnson Supply. Those are the stores where we have instantaneous markdowns for when the plumbers and electricians go to buy their equipment to bring to your property and install the project. We're continuing our EV initiatives, which is a combination of both EV charger infrastructure and then also targeted incentives on electric vehicles. Going forward, starting in Triennial Plan 6, we will only be focusing on low and moderate income households or customers and business and government customers for EV rebates. And in this case, going forward, it's going to require that people will also purchase a smart charger so that they can be assured of charging their vehicle off peak. And then the last category is demand management. This is where we're helping to manage the charging times of electric vehicles and also folks' use of batteries at their home or small business, and compensating them for helping the grid reduce strain during peak times. There's also a demand response program element of that we're doing with bigger customers. So those are the 5 categories. There's a smattering of other initiatives that I won't go through one by one. Probably the most significant of these are the last 2 you see, number 6 and 7. So the Efficiency Maine Green Bank is an initiative within Efficiency Maine to provide financing to complement the financial rebates that we're giving folks, and that helps many people get their projects over the finish line. We have a good level of activity going on now for residential customers, but we're hoping to supplement that with more offerings for commercial and other customers. But that's a little bit hung up right now on accessing some grant money that we were allocated and awarded, but that has gotten hung up in court cases. And then strategic initiatives is just generally something we have going on in the background. The most important part of that probably is our ongoing evaluation, measurement, and verification that we do on all our programs. But we're pretty proud of the work we've been doing in the innovation as well, to pilot new technologies and new applications of technologies in Maine's climate. And then also our general public information and outreach and all the resources we make available on our website. So a couple high-level highlights of the plan. We are all in on heat pumps. It won't surprise you to hear. We are able during this plan to continue and even grow our emphasis on serving low-income and multifamily properties. We're able in this program to maintain the trajectory we've been on for weatherization, and the trajectory that we have been shooting for is what would satisfy the targets that are in the climate action plan. So we didn't just pick these trajectories out of a hat. We looked at what was in the climate action plan and designed our program and our budgets to try and meet that. I already mentioned the Green Bank activity and the demand management programs, and I've described the EV stuff. So those are the highlights of the plan. Here's a little snapshot of some of the metrics that we're forecasting will be delivered through the course of this 3 years of activities and budgets. So we're forecasting that we should be able to deliver 38,000 homes that are fully heated by heat pumps by the end of this 3-year period, of which 6,500 we forecast will be low-income homes. This does keep us on the trajectory to meet the 2030 targets that were laid out in the original climate action plan from 5 years ago. And we're still on track. So it's looking good, and we have good funding to support that. The wrinkle that I think we're going to have to keep a close eye on is whether any of the new macroeconomic things going on in the world are going to impact this. So everything from the price of oil to the tariffs to federal tax credits could certainly have an impact on the Maine consumers' appetite for putting in more heat pumps. But so far, so good. This is a graph showing the trajectory that we are forecasting for heat pumps in Maine, and the red line shows you where the climate action plan would have us landing in 2030 in order to stay on course and meet our emissions goals. And we get there if we hit it out of the park and we are successful in everything we're trying to do. And we could we have some challenges. We could fall a little short if we fall behind. But right now, sitting in 2025, at the end of 2025, we're still in that on that curve, that upper curve, and on our way to that destination. So it's looking good. The other core element of reducing emissions in homes. So we obviously are trying to get cleaner heating systems that are more efficient and use a cleaner set of fuels. A heat pump does that. A heat pump is saving about 60% carbon emissions compared to a home heated with oil in Maine. And that's even using today's grid, which is pretty clean, but not totally without fossil fuels serving that grid. But even then, we're still getting a 60% carbon savings. But so switching to heat pumps is a really effective way to reduce carbon emissions, but obviously weatherizing the home is another one. And furthermore, is a very nice complement. It works very well together with heat pumps. We're forecasting that we will add another 9,900 homes weatherized by the end of this triennial plan, and a good breakout between low income and moderate income as a part of that. And both of those are critical to staying on track for the targets that are in the climate action plan. I don't know if you can see this, but that red bar again, those are the targets in the climate action plan for all homes weatherized. And then the one on the right is for low income homes weatherized, which is a subset. It's not additional, it's a subset of the total. The dark blue line is what we've accomplished in Maine, which is not just Efficiency Maine, that also includes the work that Maine Housing is doing and others, anything that we were able to count. The dotted blue line, which is sort of in the middle there for fiscal years 26, 7, 8, that's the period of the triennial plan. That's what we're forecasting those budgets will enable us to do, all other things equal. And then the green dotted line at the end is outside of the term of the upcoming triennial plan, but that is presumably what we would be able to continue doing if we keep it up. So it's looking okay, and that we are on track. I do think weatherization is also going to face some headwinds potentially with the macroeconomic situation, and so we're going to have to keep a close eye on that. I mentioned earlier that a big component of this plan is called demand management. This is a little bit different than trying to conserve energy. This is more about the time of use of when you use your energy, in particular, trying to avoid times of peak demand on the grid. Those are the times that you start pushing the boundaries of what the grid can deliver. If you do that too much, you need to build the grid bigger. We're going to have to do some of that anyway, but it's quite expensive. It takes time. It impacts reliability of the grid. So anything we can be doing to mitigate demand on the grid during peak times is going to be very valuable to all ratepayers. It will help save money and it will enhance reliability. Our plan, we think, will be able to shave 137 megawatts off of peak load by the summer of 2028. And we're really excited about a much more robust program with batteries, small batteries in homes and businesses. That one in particular is quite vulnerable to whatever Congress does right now on federal tax credits. So if they take those tax credits away, we're going to have an issue there. But right now, we think that is a really exciting program that will deliver a ton of benefits. Carbon, the reason we're all having this conversation, is one of the key metrics, and the cumulative effect of all the programs that we have in this 3-year plan. By the 3rd year, all of those projects that will have been completed will be delivering just about 330,000 tons of CO2 annually in savings. One last little wrinkle, Sarah mentioned this in her intro, because we are shifting, because one of the key ways we're achieving carbon savings is to shift off of fossil fuels to other cleaner fuel types or other kinds of equipment that use electricity. We are increasing the amount of consumption of electricity that happens. And when you do that, you're increasing the denominator of the number of kilowatt hours that are flowing across the grid. And it just so happens that the way the Public Utilities Commission and the utilities recover their costs in order to pay for the cost of running the grid, it's not the profits, this is just the cost to keep the thing running. They assess a fee based on the number of kilowatt hours. So if we increase the number of kilowatt hours that we're using on the grid, and we do it in a smart way, so it's not increasing peak demand, but it's happening, some of it's happening in the middle of the night, some of it's happening mid-morning when maybe there isn't a lot of other use on the grid, we can flow more kilowatt hours of electricity across the grid, and that will dilute the cost impact for recovering the cost of the grid. So the price per kilowatt hour will actually be suppressed. It will go down from what it would have otherwise been. And we estimate that that's almost $500 million of suppression of prices on electricity that will result from the 3 years of adding more heat pumps and EVs through this program. And we're pretty excited about that. And that's been a big selling point. And that's a new policy that the state adopted a couple of years ago. This is almost the last slide, I think. So the aggregate cost effectiveness or benefit to cost ratio is for every $1 of total costs for all these projects, there are, we estimate, $3.7 of savings, monetizable value savings. And that's it. This is where you can get all the gory details. If you go to this link, the plan is there, a summary of the plan is there, the budgets and the metrics are there, all of the backup appendices for each of the individual programs is there. But it's not light reading, so unless you're having trouble sleeping, maybe a PowerPoint summary will suffice. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. That was an awesome summary. There was an awful lot in there, and I do want to give folks here a chance to maybe offer some questions to you. First, I wanted to note that just to reemphasize what you had said about the benefits of what we're talking about here, when we reduce greenhouse gas emissions through energy efficiency measures, we're also saving people money on their electrical bills. And so we're, certainly something that we're all really sensitive to, and appreciate all the work that you and your team have done to put this plan together, with that as one of the things that is really important to everybody. And also appreciate you flagging those areas of vulnerability related to what's going on at the federal level, something that this council is going to need to think about as we look at implementation of our plan over the next couple of years and going into our next planning cycle. And also just wanted to highlight from the DEP perspective, my thanks to Michael and his team for working with us on collaboration to not only put in heat pumps, but also to swap out those old oil tanks, as we saw in the December 23 and January 24 storms. One of the vulnerabilities that we have in Maine is our reliance on home heating oil. And when we have an awful lot of water, our tanks float, and oil floats on water, and we had a hell of a mess to deal with. So this has been a great collaboration between our agencies to be able to address that. So thanks, Michael, for working with us on all of those things. So before we move on to our next topic, does anybody have any questions for Michael?
Only easy ones. I see Elaine has a hand up.
Elaine?
Michael, can you talk about battery storage and how it's evolved and what its availability is for commercial and residential?
Well, I'll try to do that in a way that's concise. I mean, the key thing to note is that the prices of batteries have dropped a lot over the last decade. Mass production for a lot of different applications, certainly electric vehicles among them, but that has made them much more affordable. They're still a little bit out of reach. They need some kind of subsidy and or tax credits usually to make them reachable. But the point is, you can get now batteries from a variety of manufacturers that you can have installed in your home, in your garage somewhere, that will provide backup for your house. So if you're not one of those people that wants to go tug on the cord of a portable generator for when the power goes out, you might want to have one of these batteries to back up your house or your small business. So they go all the way from small sizes like that are about the size of a suitcase up to very, very large industrial size and grid supporting batteries. And I think the key thing to note about them is A, their price is coming down. B, they're so versatile. They provide so much functionality. They obviously not only store energy for when you want to use it at another time, which could then displace the amount of peak demand, the amount of demand you might put on the grid during a peak time, but also they can dispatch what they've stored up at those critical times as well. And you can be compensated for that. So that's what our program is doing now on a very small scale. As Ken Colburn knows well, another exciting feature of that is because you can control it remotely and charge it and discharge it remotely in real time based on what's going on the grid. If you happen to be located on a circuit of the grid where there's a lot of renewable energy being generated, maybe it's a really sunny day or maybe it's a really windy day, but there's not a lot of demand on that circuit at that time, the local prices of that electricity plummet, and they can even sometimes go negative. But if we had our state littered with these batteries strategically located, we could suck up that surplus generation at those moments at very low prices and charge up our batteries. And then we can do things with those batteries that are valuable later in the day or later in the week when we really need them, whether it's to heat our heat pumps or run our business or keep a refrigerator cold or something. So they come in all shapes and sizes, and I think they're going to be a really big part of the future. It will be really discouraging if the Congress removes some of the tax credit support for them right now, because they're just right at the precipice of becoming super valuable, and I think much more commonplace and widespread. And if that doesn't happen, I think it's going to be delayed, but I also think it's inevitable. We're going to see a lot of these on the system. Bowdoin College and the Portland Jetport have proposed big projects to put it behind the meter. We were really excited to support those, but I think they're going to fall apart if Congress does away with the tax credit.
Does anybody else have questions for Michael? I would just add a note, Michael. It's interesting. The way that you talk about battery storage is something that I heard 20 years ago going to a conference learning about smart grid technology and the idea of how we balance our energy storage and energy consumption. And it's taken us a long time to get there, but finally the technology is catching up. And with the incentives that we've had access to, we've been able to make great strides, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to make those kind of investments because it could really make a difference for us.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate, people are starting to wrap their head around how it could provide value for the customer who is the owner of the battery and the battery is located on their property. That you can start to think of the ways that that could be valuable to you. I don't think what people appreciate is how valuable it is to all the other ratepayers who are on the grid, because it will make our grid so much more robust and efficient that this is going to be a pretty easy sell, I think, in terms of selling to policymakers the rationale for why we should continue providing program support for these batteries, because the value that is delivered for all ratepayers, even the people who are not the customer who is hosting that, is really significant by helping spread out the times when we use our power, so we're avoiding overloading at peak times.
Great point. Ken?
Thank you. Thanks, Melanie. I just wanted to add, Michael's spot on. Put in rough terms for the council and the attendees, our grid was built pretty expensively, as you all know, to meet demand at peak. And as a result of that, it's only used about half of the actual capacity that it could be used on. In rough terms, about half. That means we could do twice as much power over the existing grid without expanding it for electrification, if we could manage that power ideally. And that's what demand management does, as Michael indicated. So that's where the savings come versus doing business as usual and continuing to build for peak. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ken. Great point. Any other questions or comments for Michael? All right. So next, if we want to change out our slides here. So we're going to hear next from the co-chairs from our Science and Technical Subcommittee. Just as a reminder for everybody, the Science and Technical Subcommittee was established to study the impacts of climate change on Maine from an objective scientific perspective based on data and analysis, and to report on the latest scientific research to the Climate Council and our working group so that the decisions that this council makes is grounded in science and based on information that is relevant specifically to Maine, but also thinking of our place in the world at large as well. So among other tasks, the STS is charged with maintaining and updating sea level rise projections and identifying priority information needs to guide scientific research on the impacts of climate change. With many recent and proposed cuts to federal funding, the STS has begun to identify specific examples of funding and information sources that may be at risk for us here in Maine. And so we've asked the co-chairs to provide an update on that particular effort, as well as their ongoing work to provide the council with the latest scientific and technical information about climate impacts in Maine. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Drs. Ivan Fernandez and Susie Arnold, our STS co-chairs.
Great. Thank you, Melanie. You almost gave my talk. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for the opportunity for us to be able to provide some comments about the work of STS. And my co-chair, Dr. Susie Arnold, and I will tag team on this over the next couple of minutes. I am going to review sort of the context of the work that we do in STS. It's a little different than some of the other agencies and working groups, and focusing on the science. I appreciate Melanie's comments on the importance of science, which has been evident from the beginning of the establishment of the council in decision making. And since we were talking about benefit costs, I've had a fair amount of experience with doing science that is behind policy, and when science informs policy, it almost always is cost effective. And so we're pleased to do this work. The STS, like working groups, is charged with meeting at least twice a year. And we had our first meeting last Thursday, June 5th. Of the STS. It was an in-person meeting with a Zoom option in Augusta. And we were delighted to have a really robust attendance and discussion during that meeting, focusing on the work going forward. As Melanie indicated, this is the beginning of the charge, the highlight language of the charge to the work of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee from the original law in 2019 that Governor Mills signed into law. Just going to backtrack a minute here to identify, monitor, study, and report out to the council and to the working groups findings and recommendations related to climate change in the state and its effects on the state's climate, species, marine and coastal environments and natural landscape, and on the oceans and other bodies of water. And so the council itself is 45 scientists from Maine with expertise in Maine and about Maine. Probably better known, many of them around the world as world-renowned scientists as well, but all have volunteered to contribute their time and energy to the work that we do. We're not a task group of engineers. We have some social scientists, but we're not a social science focused entity. And so our focus really is on climate science, climatology, ecological sciences and a focus on the natural resources and of the state of Maine that are also important, and all of us who depend on them. The committee is appointed for 3 years, and so we, as assembled right now, are not the committee that will be charged with doing a major assessment in support of the third quadrennial update of Maine Won't Wait, which would come with the next administration here in Maine. So our discussion focused around what might be the most important things that we can do and think about over the next 12 months. And in that regard, there really were two things that emerged from our discussion, and one would be the potential to do a short report by way of update, focusing on the most critical, most recent science since essentially since 2024, when we did our last major assessment. The other thing we talked about, and Susie will describe a little bit more in a few minutes, is in fact the reality that has already been alluded to, is that we're living in a remarkable time in American history as far as science across the board, having to do with research funding, with our agency scientist partners, with students' engagement with science, with significant impacts already with the current decisions in Washington, and significant impacts anticipated going forward. So we're not a political group from the standpoint of advocacy, such as Union of Concerned Scientists, but it would be impossible for us to consider the landscape of science moving forward in the same way we have over the last 4 or 5 years as an entity. So the science that we assess, you might ask, where does it come from? And there are sort of 4 things that are sources of information that guide the work of the scientists on the STS. First and foremost, the gold standard of science is peer-reviewed literature. And so we contribute to that as scientists in our day job, but we look broadly on what are the peer-reviewed science findings that inform the work of the Maine Climate Council. The second one up there is also quality assured data. And that's important because we will include, and do include in our assessment work, representations of data, such as a time series of the temperature of the air or the ocean, that is drawn from or taken from typically federal data sets that are highly quality assured, meaning that the methodologies and the management of the data set itself assures the highest quality of data available for analysis. And in our reports, we may represent those data, and therefore you may not see that exact graph in someone's publication, whether ours or other scientists. That it is a new representation of those data, but anyone can go to the web, download those exact same data, and evaluate them for themselves as well. We also are charged, as Melanie mentioned, with identifying information needs, and that takes on new meaning as we try to understand what are the needs in research, what are the needs for monitoring, for data sets, in light of the changes that are taking place. And so we'll certainly incorporate that into our deliberations. And then we use national and international science. Obviously, those are not focused on Maine, but elements of that science is extremely important to us. Most of you would recognize the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, IPCC, the National Climate Assessment, NCA, all have been incorporated and used in our analysis in the past. The current planned NCA is now at risk, and so what happens there remains to be seen. So the assessments that we've done, as a reminder, in 2020, we did the first major assessment, major code word for hundreds of pages of science to inform that I'm sure everyone has read, as well as summaries of that and the most critical science. In 2021, we did a short update. And then just this past year, we did another extensive assessment, hundreds of pages. This is not a repeat of 2020. It is built on the 2020 assessment. So we have a really deep, robust body of science, really focused on Maine, that guides the work of the working groups and certainly the work of the council and essentially people throughout Maine. And so what we're proposing is a short update report, potentially in the winter of 2026, to inform the ongoing work of the council and Maine people, to inform the elections and discussions around policy that will move us forward towards the necessary goals as our planet is accelerating in its rates of change, and to point to information needs related to it. In doing that, we will reach out to all of you. This is the familiar org chart for the Maine Climate Council, representing hundreds of people that are engaged in this work. And so SDS plans to have a short survey to find out what you might identify as the most critical research, data, monitoring needs from the perspective of the work that you do, that we will incorporate into our decisions on what the most important thing to include in the report is. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susie to take it from there.
Thank you, Ivan. You can just leave it on this slide for a minute. I'll give a small introduction on the survey we put together. But first, as Melanie and Ivan said earlier, the STS is charged not just with identifying, monitoring, and studying climate impacts on Maine, but also identifying the critical information needs around research and monitoring. So given this, and given the challenges that are facing science, and particularly climate science, Ivan and I put together a short survey to poll our STS membership about the critical scientific assets that have been lost or are at risk of being lost due to federal cuts. So this is an effort for us to share collectively how our work and our colleagues' work as scientists is being altered in Maine and what impact it's having, including on our ability to implement the actions outlined in Maine Won't Wait. So what you're seeing here is the very short, simple survey that we sent out to our STS members. Just importantly, we're collecting not a comprehensive list of all of the federal cuts that are impacting Maine, but rather what we're experiencing as a subcommittee and what we know of how our colleagues here in Maine are also being impacted. So the asset questionnaire, as we call it, the scientific asset questionnaire, asked for STS members to list critical scientific assets at risk. So those that have already been lost or are at risk of being lost given proposed budget cuts, that would impact Maine's climate work here. And then importantly, we asked for a tangible example of how these cuts could impact the science community and Maine's people and or the economy. So this is really gives us the ability to kind of tell the story of the importance of these scientific assets. So I'm going to show just a couple examples. You can move on, Ivan, of just two of the responses that we've seen in the survey, and we have about 20 responses. The survey is still open. It'll be open for another 10 days or so as we collect more information from our membership and also figure out exactly what we're going to do with this information. But a couple examples of responses that we've seen, I took the liberty to kind of link them back to some of what's in our current state climate action plan. So if you go to strategy E, which is about protecting the environment and natural and working lands and waters in Maine, there are a number of actions that are impacted pretty directly by some of these funding cuts that we're seeing already, and certainly by the cuts that are proposed. So if you look at action 5, it's all about supporting farming, forestry, and fisheries industries in Maine to adapt to climate change. And one of our STS members talked about the loss of $1.5 million of funding from the USDA that supported the Climate Adaptation and Mitigation Fellowship Program, which supported about 50 farmers and 50 ag advisors who were writing agriculture and agroforestry climate adaptation and mitigation plans. So if you look at the specifics in Maine Won't Wait, there are specifics around increasing the amount of food consumed in Maine and from Maine producers. There are specifics around increasing technical assistance and capacity to provide guidance on climate solutions to communities and natural resources industries. So there's some direct impacts here. And their tangible example was that farmers are increasingly reliant upon climate forecasts and reliable weather reports. These going away is going to have tangible impacts on adaptation in agriculture. And then I think they really summed it up pretty well here more broadly by saying loss of scientific funding equals lack of ability to bring on graduate students equals a generation of scientists not being trained equals deferred impact on science in general, including climate science. Okay, so you can go to the next slide, Ivan. I'll provide one other example of someone's response and how it links directly to an action in Maine Won't Wait. So if you still in strategy E, if you look at action number 6, it has to do with better monitoring of inland and coastal and marine ecosystems to increase resilience. So some of the language around this action is the state should continue to enhance monitoring and data collection of natural and working lands and waters to better understand the impacts of climate change, identify future trends, and monitor economic and social conditions. So this STS scientist mentioned a critical asset at risk of being lost is the Narracous buoys. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these buoys, these are oceanographic buoys situated throughout the Gulf of Maine. And one of the tangible examples that they provided about how the loss of Narracous buoys might impact Maine people and Maine science is that this is where we look to get deep water temperature and salinity measurements. And these are the best indicators of changes in water masses. These buoys give early warning signals for changes in the ecosystem like whale foraging patterns and lobster movements. I think if you also asked fishermen about the importance of Narracous buoys, they'd talk more about their personal safety and the safety of their crew. These are buoys that they can look up in the morning, get weather reports, and make sure it's safe for them to go do their job that day. So under this action, not only do they talk about improving tracking and decision-making by creating new monitoring programs to fill data gaps, but there's also important things like the safety of Maine people that are being lost or at risk by these scientific assets being lost. So as Ivan mentioned at our STS meeting last week, we kind of began the conversation of what actions we could take to share this information and what could potentially be done about the loss and potential loss of these important assets. One potential action that would be a fairly easy one to do would be to document these lost assets as information needs in the upcoming short report that Ivan mentioned. The conversation is still ongoing for now about how exactly we'll handle this information going forward. Like I mentioned, the survey is open for another 10 days and discussions will continue about appropriate communications of these data and what the state can do about it to kind of fill these data gaps. So that's all I have, Ivan. Did you want to add anything else about next steps or questions and answers?
No, that's great. Just if there's any questions, of course. Otherwise, back to Melanie.
Thanks, Ivan and Susie. Any questions for the co-chairs of the STS? Well, I just want to reiterate what Melanie said about how important it is that the work of the Climate Council is grounded in the data and the science. And thank you to both of you and the entire STS for the work that you do, and also just how important it is for us to understand the funding and data that is at risk. So thank you so much for this presentation. We now want to turn it over to an update from the Department of Education. We have Glenn Cummings and Teddy Lyman here today. As you all will recall, the Green Schools program is a recommendation of the Climate Council in Maine Won't Wait. And there's been a lot of exciting activity helping in terms of the work that folks have been doing with Maine youth and to support Maine schools in climate action. And so thrilled to have Glenn and Teddy here today to talk about that work.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I believe Teddy is going to set up our slides, and we'll follow along with the slides we put together. Just want to say that my colleagues here, Teddy Lyman, who is helping and has been working for the last 2 years with climate education grants, and Paige Nichols, who runs the Office of Innovation and is the lead in our office, and myself comprise pretty much what you're seeing within the Department of Education officially, but there's a lot of support for it more broadly. Next slide. So as Sarah said, this is actually relatively new. The legislature passed the Green Schools Program or Initiative in 2023. I was hired about 8 months ago. Teddy obviously was already on board working specifically on a component of the work that we're doing, and has done a terrific job. And then there's some work that Paige will be talking about around more learning initiative as well. So we like to kind of organize this by the 4 points of the compass. What are the things that we actually do? We have a north, we have an east, we have a south, and we have a west. The north is leadership in climate action that we're trying to promote within schools. That could be everything from obviously students and student clubs and student groups, but specifically educators, and particularly helpful to have the top leadership of the school districts on board. School committee members, school board members, superintendents, principals, et cetera, that really believe in the power both of learning, and there are a number of other advantages which we'll go into in helping schools with green initiatives. So the first one is around just building that leadership. The east point is the building clean energies, clean energy systems in buildings. We'll take a look at some of the data. It's not great in terms of what Maine schools are today, just because we are so far back in our depreciation on those buildings and how important that is. And I think Molly says you're not hearing me particularly well. Let me just see if I can make this a little bit better. And then in the southern part, which is where Teddy has been working, climate curriculum, instruction, and assessment is a major component of what we're trying to do. Where the purpose of this is that we would start to really build on some of the things that we just heard Dr. Arnold and Dr. Fernandez talk about, the importance of science. And we believe, and there's a lot of evidence of that, if we were to fully enact and do the best we possibly could around the national next generation math and science standards and the Maine learning results, the idea of climate, sustainability, energy systems, technology, biology, the implications are huge and rich. So we get a double win, not only in cleaning up our energy systems, but helping students actually strengthen their academic performance. And if you ask parents, you ask principals, you ask superintendents, you ask school committee, what do you want? You want an efficient organization and one that is showing excellence in academic achievement. And we believe that we have that sustainability, climate change has a major role working in this area towards those goals. And then finally to the west is a climate ready career path, meaning that K through 16 that we will be working and are working with the Department of Labor and other areas specifically around trying to improve and strengthen the pipeline for people to enter into jobs, both technical jobs and more policy jobs that are helpful to the environment. So that's the overview of the initiative. As I say, we're certainly my portion of the job as director of Green Schools Program is about 8 months. So We have a number of initiatives that we have started and even completed, and we even have an award to share with you, a national award, and some of the work that the two departments together, GOPIF and the Department of Education, is working on. So I will stay closer to my computer. Apparently, you're having a little trouble hearing me. So next slide, Teddy. Just to give you an idea of where we are, we have some, I'm going to go to the right-hand column first. We have some major challenges. About 66% of Maine schools use oil burners today. About 2/3 of them are older than 20 years old. So you can imagine the efficiency is not terrific, and its production of pollution is probably significant. We still have 5 school districts that have some form of kerosene, believe it or not, in their school districts. Local funds are very limited. We do have a construction renovation fund. As you can imagine, it does not meet the enormous need statewide, and local funds are also limited. So our ability to really make major changes is still restricted. However, we have a little bit of good news in terms of progress. We have 39 school districts that have shifted to using heat pump systems, geothermal air or geothermal water source systems, moving in directions that get us into electrification. I want to thank, we'll go into a little bit more detail down below, but want to thank Efficiency Maine has helped us with over $8 million worth of heat pumps in Maine schools that move into more electrification, which will reduce our carbon, create more efficiency, and save money in the long run, as Michael's report indicated. One piece of good news in this, we have 125 school districts total. 39 of them, moving into alternative systems, but I will say 39 of them are some of the largest. Those 39 are some of the largest school districts in the state of Maine, and so the enrollment in those schools are higher. Therefore, a significant and growing minority of students do have access to basically cleaner energy systems, more efficient energy systems, more cost savings, and reduction in air quality problems and air pollution in general, and decarbonize and carbon. The existence of carbon is reduced in those school districts. So in a way, we are making progress, but not nearly at the level that we would like to. So in that vein, let's talk about some things that we're doing to address that problem. First of all, in focusing on these new levels of energy efficiency, saving money and pollution. The first one is that we have just completed an RFP process to bring on a company. Actually, it will be a Maine company. That are technical consultants for energy analysis and planning. So this won't actually do the work, but it will help them make decisions, help school districts make decisions about their energy systems and how it is, where the weaknesses are, where the potential analysis could help point them in the direction of how could they reduce their carbon emissions and be more efficient, save money. And they will be working with a minimum of 10 school districts across the state. Very, very happy to bring them on in the next few months and probably within the next 30 days. And once we do that, we'll be putting that out to all the districts for getting them in a pipeline to get some of that work, some of that support. In addition to that, we've hired a consultant to help work with district sustainability plans. We know that the districts that actually put into writing a sustainability plan are much more effective and actually over a period of time being able to develop pretty high levels of accomplishments when it comes to these kind of things, and specifically energy, but also in curriculum. On the right-hand column, we just passed, we'll formalize this. We really have already begun the network for green schools. These are educators, students, parents, et cetera, interested in building stronger, greener schools. And that network will be formalized if the recommendation of the Committee on Education is passed by the legislature, both Senate and House, and signed by the governor. Green School Symposium. We have established a Green School Symposium. We are in the process of developing for November 7th. All 4 of those points of the compass will be our major themes as we go forward. And we will have hopefully a convening of 300 to 400 people that within the education sphere, but also private vendors and that work with school districts, et cetera, will be there. We're looking forward to that. And then we are in anticipation of some getting started energy reduction guides specifically aligned to Maine schools. And we're working with some outside help on it, getting that together. That will be released this fall for all Maine school districts. And finally, as I had mentioned, we are working with the Maine Department of Labor on career pathways K through 16 that will help create clear line delineations of where students starting as early as elementary school can start thinking about career jobs in the energy sector. And next slide. And so this is, we received an award. I thought we had little chance of getting it just because we're still pretty embryonic, but the Project Green Schools out of Boston have a national footprint, and they gave us the National Green Schools Difference Maker, and that's Assistant or Deputy Commissioner Dan Tudor, who and I went down to Washington, D.C. with Abigail Haynes of GoPIF on May 15th. We got recognition for the partnership that existed long before me, by the way, between Maine Department of Education and GoPIF for the Green Schools program. So right there, that gives you a little bit of an overview of where we are. I want to pass it on to Paige Nichols, who will talk about the Maine Outdoor Learning Initiative that has existed over the last couple of years. And then Teddy will finish up with some descriptions of our climate education grants that go out to educators across the state. So I'll turn it over to Paige.
Thanks, Glenn. I think I've talked a little about this here, so I might be repeating myself, but thought it was worth mentioning in here. And I had asked Glenn and Teddy to include a slide on it, and they said, great, well, we'll just have you cover the slide. So here I am. So the Maine Outdoor Learning Initiative, we started in 2021, and it was paid for using the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds that were part of, as you all know, the emergency relief funding that we received as a result of the pandemic. Through that, we were able to support over 150 programs and reach nearly 15,000 students, which was really exciting. The effort was to provide opportunities for students all over the state who don't typically have the chance to experience like rich outdoor learning, primarily in the summer, but there was also spring and fall programming as well. Through that, students were exposed to potential career opportunities, and then I think maybe most importantly, just a care for the environment. There's been research to show that just spending time in nature creates empathy for nature, which then links in, I think, to much of the work that Glenn and Teddy have been, and this council have been promoting. So the funding for that ended. We were able to, using funding from that, build an outdoor learning pavilion, which is on Mackworth Island in Falmouth. So we have like a permanent space. It's really beautiful, open air, has electricity and internet and lab tables that can be moved in and out, and it's fenced in, and it's available to outdoor ed and school groups to come use the space and explore Mackworth Island. And if you are familiar with Mackworth Island, the summer months are very busy and the parking lot is very small, so it's hard to get large groups out there. But because we have now this space, school buses and groups can go right through all the way up to the school section and use the parking lot up there and have the pavilion be a jumping off point for exploring the island. We have a contractor working with the Department of Ed who's really leading MOLI now. He does the scheduling for groups and also has ready to go like learning packets for different age groups for while they're on the island, so that they can actually use the natural surroundings of Mackworth Island as part of their learning while they're out there. We continue to explore options for funding future programming like this. We definitely have a lot of partnerships with community-based organizations. We were excited to have been able to do this at the scale that we were. And obviously, we're in a different situation with funding at the moment, but certainly excited to continue to explore possibilities for providing these opportunities going forward. So I just wanted to mention that because I thought it kind of fit into what these guys were presenting on today. So thank you.
Thanks, Paige. So hi, my name's Teddy Lyman, and I get to work with Glenn and Paige on this work. And what's really exciting is both my position and the two things I'm going to share right now are a direct result of a recommendation in Maine Won't Wait in 2020. The first of which is a climate literacy plan, which is actually the first of its kind in the country. And we're really excited about the strategies and recommendations it lays out to kind of set some guidelines for us to be working in. There's still a long way to go, but we are excited to use this literacy plan to guide us over the next 4 years and continue to update it and monitor our progress. The literacy plan was a result of a task force in partnership with the Maine Environmental Education Association and supported by GoPIF, and is really an exciting piece. And after I talk, I'll put a link to that in the chat. It's also on the DOE website. The second piece is a grant program that's also a result of the recommendation, which was in strategy H of the original Maine Won't Wait. And this grant program was created in a piece of legislation, LD 1902 in 2022, to help provide professional development, confidence, experience, and curriculum support to teachers and therefore their schools and their students. And I'm excited to share that there's 13 new programs starting this next school year. That will be 30 total programs with $1.6 million in funding to schools on climate education. And these programs look different depending on where they are in the state and depending on their structure. We've really gravitated towards a model of either summits where schools and community-based organizations bring together teachers from a whole variety of schools, or schools working on an individual level with a wide range of their staff involved in the program. We found a lot of success with that. Excitingly, we've gotten some kind of results back from our initial assessment of phase 1, which was last spring, and are seeing some really amazing improvement in experience and confidence, and also partnerships, which are kind of the two main goals of the program. Phase 2, which has been happening all this year, is wrapping up as the school year wraps up this June, and we're excited to see some really awesome results from that coming up. I think that's all I had to share.
I think that's it from us, Sarah. And the only thing I want to add is thank you to this council, because many of the suggestions that we asked in the update in late 2024 were accepted. And so certainly if you read the most recent climate action plan, it is significantly rich with concepts around education, which we really appreciate. So glad to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you all so much for those updates. Are there any questions for Glenn or Teddy or Paige about the work of the Green Schools program? Okay. Glenn, we'll look forward to hearing more about the summit coming up. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Molly, who's going to provide an update on some advances in Maine's building codes.
All right, thanks so much, Sarah, and thank you, Ashley, for running the slides for me. As most of you know, my name is Molly Siegel. I'm a policy advisor at the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future. And today I'm just going to share some quick updates about Maine's new building codes, which many of you know went into effect on April 7th, and how some state agencies are working together to support communities and builders and consumers to understand and follow the new codes. So you might notice on the slide the date is wrong. That is a mistake. However, it's because This presentation is from a webinar that we gave on May 21st. It was a really excellent overview of the changes from the previous codes to the new codes. So I'm going to talk about mostly non-technical stuff today, but if you're interested in digging in more and learning about the specific changes to the new codes, I would highly recommend listening in on that recording. Greg Gilbert from the Fire Marshal's Office and Ross Anthony from the Governor's Energy Office did a really great job of walking through those changes. So you can go to the next slide, Ashley. I just wanted to bring us back to the climate plan really quickly to show how codes showed up in the climate plan. In the original climate plan in 2020, building codes were recognized as being crucially important for meeting Maine's climate goals, both in terms of reducing emissions and resilience for buildings. And that came up again in last year's climate plan, where the council recommended that Maine establish strong systems to support rapid adoption of and compliance with increasingly climate-friendly building codes and standards. So climate-friendly means both increasingly energy efficient, utilizing clean energy, and then also safe and resilient building codes. The council, this council recommended several specific ways for how Maine can do that, which includes continuing to adopt building codes that reduce energy and emissions, and also providing communities with the support to understand and follow the codes. If you can go on to the next slide, please. Part of those recommendations in the plan focused on where building codes live. So the codes program in Maine currently lives in the State Fire Marshal's Office. Those are the staff who support communities to understand the codes and also who support adoption of the codes. As Brian mentioned, currently at the Fire Marshal's Office, but this program is slated to move to the Maine Office of Community Affairs later this year. The intention of this is to provide more coordinated support to communities, which is really central to the mission of MOCA, as Brian mentioned earlier. So our office, GOPIF and GEO, have been working with the staff at the Fire Marshal's Office who run the codes program to really prepare for that move and to set up a long-term plan for consistent code trainings and support in all parts of the state for all folks who need to be a part of this transition. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. So just a little bit about what is in Maine's codes. We refer to Maine's statewide building and energy code as MUBEC, which stands for the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code. MUBEC consists of a number of standards and codes. So some of them are from the International Code Council, which develops these standards. So we have from the ICC, the International Residential Code, the Commercial Building Code, Existing Building Code, and then the Energy Code for residential buildings, as well as the International Mechanical Code. We also have several codes from the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, which is ASHRAE. So those codes include ventilation for residential and commercial buildings, and then energy standards for commercial buildings. And then finally, the American Society for Testing and Materials has codes for radon control. So that is what Maine's building code consists of. These codes are governed by the Technical Building Codes and Standards Board. So that is the MUBEC board that adopts the new codes. The board represents folks from around Maine, including municipalities, both above population of 5,000 and below 5,000. It includes residential and commercial builders, representatives of historical preservation, energy efficiency, lumber dealers, architects, and other stakeholders. And this board is responsible for analyzing, discussing, and adopting, vetting the new codes. It has several technical advisory groups who advise on the adoption of codes. And really the process ensures that the codes are reasonable, accountable, and relevant to Maine. And part of that process is often adopting amendments to the codes. So again, more detail if you want to listen into the webinar. Greg goes into this. And just a couple of notes. Building codes are the minimum standard. So the statewide code is the minimum standard to which structures are built. The codes have flexibility and multiple options for pathways to compliance, knowing that not every building is the same and not every builder wants to meet the codes in exactly the same way. And just a note about enforcement and where this is applicable. The statewide building code, because it is statewide, applies to all buildings that are constructed or renovated in Maine. So the code is statewide, it applies to all construction. Only municipalities with a population of 4,000 or more are required to enforce the code. Municipalities with populations of less than 4,000 may choose whether to enforce the code. So again, that is why it's really critical for our state agencies to be supporting communities, whether they are above 4,000 or below 4,000, to adopt and enforce the codes, as well as the contractor community. So it's important that builders around the state are adopting the code as part of their practice. And that's, again, why training and support are so important. So you can go on to the next slide. Just wanted to touch on a couple of the statutes that govern codes in Maine. So the first establishes the Division of Building Codes and Standards. So this is the group and the staff that are slated to move to MOCA and who support code adoption and training. The second is that we require to ensure that both the ICC and the ASHRAE codes are either the most recent or the edition previous to the most recent edition. So this means that when the international councils adopt new codes, when they release new codes, we are on a schedule to ensure that we stay up to date as the codes get more modern and energy efficient. And then finally, the state is also required to adopt a voluntary code, which is called the stretch code, that contains energy conservation and efficiency requirements that exceeds the statewide energy code. So municipalities can enforce that optionally if they would like to go above and beyond the current standard. Next slide, please. Here is what the codes in Maine consist of now on the right, and on the left is where we previously were right before the codes changed on April 7th. So currently we are on the 2021 version of the International Code Council codes, the 2019 version of ASHRAE, 2008 version of the Radon code, and then we have a stretch code, which basically means that projects need to be 15% more efficient than the baseline code. You can go to the next slide, please. So finally, before I wrap up, some key points that folks should know about climate-friendly building codes. Why are they important? Number one, greater energy efficiency. So improved energy standards will reduce heating and cooling costs and promote clean energy, which is important to our climate goals and also important to saving people money on their energy bills. Codes lead to safe buildings. So there are improved structural guidelines in the codes that help protect homes and businesses from natural disasters and wear over time. This is really important for resilience. The Buildings Working Group had some really some points about that, which are in the Climate Action Plan. The codes promote healthy indoor air quality. So they have standards which specify better ventilation and radon protection measures in order to improve indoor environments. And finally, consistency statewide. So a uniform code really ensures fairness and clarity for builders, for contractors and homeowners who just want to understand what the standards are and what they should be expecting in terms of new construction and renovation. Just a couple specific benefits in terms of energy costs. These are some analyses from the Department of Energy, who estimate that from switching from the 2015 to the 2021 code, which we're currently on, a typical Maine home could save an estimated average of $978 in energy savings in the first year. Over the life cycle of a home, the home could save over $23,000 in energy costs, and the incremental costs of building to the new code would have a payback period of less than 5 years. And finally, yes, trading is available, and this is really the heart of what we are hoping to provide to communities through collaborating with MOCA, with the Fire Marshal's Office, and with the Governor's Energy Office. Trainings upcoming and recordings of past trainings are available currently on the Fire Marshal's website, as well as on the Governor's Energy Office. And we are working to provide even more robust training offerings over the coming years. So if you just go to the final slide, there's a couple of links here on where you can find these trainings, and these will be provided with the slide deck, so you can click on them. And that is it for me. So again, happy to answer any quick questions about support for communities and to refer you to those more technical resources.
Thanks so much for that, Molly. just as a reminder for everybody, if you look at our climate plan, obviously implementing updated building codes has been an incredibly important part of our strategy. And we've been making really good strides in that direction. So does anybody have any questions or comments for Molly?
I just had a quick question about whether the stretch codes, how they match up against like LEED certification. You know, how would it match like a minimum LEED certification of a gold or silver level?
I would have to get back to you on that, Glenn. I am looking through and I'm not sure if there's anyone on this call that could answer that, but I can definitely check and get back to you. It's a great question.
Anybody else want to weigh in? All right. That was a really helpful summary of everything that's been going on. Thanks to everybody who provided that information this morning. So as we think about what we're going to do over the rest of the year, I know I often use the 4-letter word of work. So just like to remind everybody who's a member of the Climate Council that this is part of my shtick for everybody, is that when we ask you to join us, that you are going to have to do some work at some point. But we fortunately are in a bit of a lull for some of you right now as we're working our way through implementation. So some of the things that are going to be happening over the next few months are our working groups are going to be getting together. So you should be, if you're on a working group, you should be hearing from your working group co-chairs and some subcommittees. So there will be meetings throughout the summer and fall. And you should be discussing policy updates, talking about any new developments in technology that's relevant for your working group, and monitoring implementation of the strategies that are in the climate plan. We are going to be waiting to see how the dust settles coming out of the legislative session. There's been a fair amount of legislation that is relevant to the recommendations of the council and in the climate plan. And state agencies and others are going to be trying to figure out what that means for all of us in terms of implementation. And we'll be bringing that back to you all this fall. We're also watching to see what happens at the federal level. And like we discussed this morning, what that's going to mean for the work ahead. It obviously, as we've discussed, means some changes in what elements of our efforts are going to be funded from the federal government versus those things that we'll need to be implementing on our own at the state level, and how we're going to be continuing that important work. In September, we will be having our next meeting where we are going to be focusing a bit more on those implications of everything that's come out of the federal budget, the state budget, all of the state legislative work that's been happening. We'll be talking more about local activities that are happening to implement climate actions. And then, as was mentioned earlier, we'll be working our way towards our progress report for December 1st. So you will be hearing from us. We'll be requesting updates on policies and programs that you've been implementing that are relevant to those recommendations from Maine Won't Wait 2.0 to report on what we've been doing. And so part of how we track implementation is ensuring that our policies are consistent with the way that we track and report greenhouse gas emissions. We mentioned that a little bit earlier, but we haven't focused a lot on it this time around. I know for some people, when we start to talk about greenhouse gas emissions, it gets a little bit wonky, and it could get a little bit wonkier still because we are trying to capture a lot, as I said earlier, around science and being objective and being able to measure what we are doing. And there's an awful lot that we have going on that is relevant not only for our state, but for the nation and globally. and trying to figure out how to calculate that and our contributions to it can get pretty complicated. And we want to be as transparent about that as we can. So that's one of the things that in the next year or so, we're going to be focusing on quite a bit, is expanding the way that we do those calculations to think more broadly about how our use of electricity intersects with our use in other states. And so not just thinking about what happens within our borders, but what that means for us regionally and nationally. So you're going to start to hear some conversations from us about that coming into September and into our December meeting. And then lastly, we have some deliverables from our EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant that was part of the funding for our climate plan that we'll be submitting to EPA this year. So this grant is the one that allowed us to do additional analysis as well as increase our outreach and engagement as part of updating Maine Won't Wait. And the deliverables include our emissions modeling, climate action plan, and some further analysis that was required by EPA. And we'll be submitting those at the beginning of August. So there's a fair amount of work that's going to be happening over the remainder of this spring and summer that we'll be able to report back to you on in September. And then as we move through the rest of this year, start to work our way towards, again, getting back to the work of thinking about how we plan as well as implement for our work across the state. And so with that, I just wanted to ask if anybody has anything else that you want to add this morning. We've had a lot of information that we throw at you. I think, as you all know, we try to do a balance of giving you information versus doing a lot of collaboration and discussion. And we're sort of in that stage of we had a great planning cycle. We've got a really solid plan that we're working on implementing. There's quite a bit that's happening right now that we're trying to keep you up to date on. And then in a few months and moving into the end of the year, we're going to get back into the grind of it and have some things to discuss with you and think about how to move forward with. And so with a few minutes left, I just wanted to open it up and see if anybody has anything else to add. All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time with us this morning. It was great to see everybody. And hope you all have a wonderful summer and good luck at the end of the legislative session. And we'll look forward to working with you in your working groups and seeing you again in a few months.
Thanks, everyone.